Welcome back again, Nerd Squad. You asked for more Doctor Strange Easter eggs, and after seeing it twice now, I have about, honestly, 10 pages of notes surrounding that, as well as questions the film left me asking and speculations in regards to the future of the MCU. Got lots of notes. So if you also want another Easter egg vid, or you just want some details, thoughts that I noticed that could tell us where the future of these characters might be headed in the MCU, let us know in the comments below. But for now, this is Top 10 Nerd, I'm your host Amanda McKnight, and this is the top 10 Easter eggs you may have missed in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Part 2. Let's jump into it. But before we do, just a quick word of warning. There are spoilers abound, really, because this is a part 2 list, so we're really getting into stuff that's a little bit later in the movie, and there's a lot of spoilers. So, you've been warned. Only proceed if you're cool with spoilers. Blackagar Boltagon is a name that is referenced in the film in regards to Earth 838 hero and Illuminati member Black Bolt. I talked briefly about all the characters on part 1 for this series of lists, but I didn't really get a lot of time to deep dive into the various members, so I'm going to do a little bit of that here. Once again, never enough time to deep dive into all of them, but we're gonna do our best. Black Bolt in particular is an interesting one to include, as although he is a member of the Illuminati in the comics, the Inhumans have not yet made really any appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe thus far. Blackagar Boltagon, as Doctor Strange is amazed to learn, is really Black Bolt's true given name. He is not just a hero, but also Inhuman royalty. The Inhumans are kind of like mutants or the X-Men if you're familiar with the team. Humans who are basically superior in regards to the fact that they also have latent powers that can be activated. But unlike mutants who are born with an X gene that generally manifests powers or strange abilities around puberty or during a moment of extreme stress, Inhumans' powers are actually brought out by the Terrigen Mists during a process that's called Terrigenesis. Black Bolt himself was also played by Anson Mount, who played the character in the short-lived Inhumans television series, which is not actually considered part of the MCU collective. At least, I don't think it's canon MCU, pretty sure it's not. And despite that series flopping, Mount was actually well received in regards to his portrayal of the character. Black Bolt was exposed to the Terrigen Mists while still in his mother's womb, and was born with a powerful voice as a result. He can basically maim his enemies with just a whisper. The speech center of his brain allows him to harness the power of electrons, which he can channel into various different things, including telepathic powers, flight, and concussive blasts, which is also why his death in the film makes a lot of sense. Activating this part of his brain without having a place for that energy to leave his body because his mouth is gone resulted in likely the speech center of his brain exploding in his skull, killing him instantly. When the Illuminati present themselves before MCU Earth 616 Doctor Strange, one of the things they discuss is how interfering and getting involved with the multiverse can basically result in something that they refer to as incursions. But what is an incursion, and where does this term come from? Well, it's actually a reference to a comic book plot that actually weaves through multiple different events and story arcs, including, beginning with at least, the end of Infinity, Time Runs Out, and then finally Secret Wars. Incursions are basically when different Earths from the multiverse collide into one another, destroying each other. It turns out that incursions have been happening all over the place, with universes colliding into one another and being destroyed, in the comics that is. Included in this danger is the true Earth 616, the comic book main continuity. Upon learning of this, the Illuminati are the leading secret team in trying to find a way to stop the incursions. Although there was no appearance from James McAvoy, our younger version of Professor Charles Xavier, we did get an appearance from the older and wiser Professor X from the early 2000s X-Men films, as well as Logan, Sir Patrick Stewart. When he returned to the screen, he also rolled out in a certain iconic chair and to a certain musical theme that passionate X-Men fans would no doubt recognize, implying that this might not actually be the Fox X-Men Professor X at all, but instead the live-action version of the animated series Professor X, just at least based on the look and everything. The wheelchair that he comes out in, which is bright yellow, is reminiscent of the hover chair that we see Professor X in during the 90s animated series. It may have also actually been hovering, but can't recall off the top of my head. And the musical theme that we hear is seemingly also one in the same from that 90s animated series, although it should be noted that at the end of the film it was actually credited as the X-Men 97 theme. Now this is likely a reference to the fact that it will be reused for the continuation of the animated series, which is expected to drop on Disney Plus in mid-2023. And if you need your animated X-Men fix while you wait, there are actually a series of X-Men 92 comics for you to check out set in the same universe, including the newest X-Men 92 comic, House of XCII, which is Roman numerals for 92, which came out in 2022. But there's also a volume 1 and there's also a volume 2, so yeah, a lot of X-Men 92 stuff for you to check out while you wait. Something that we touched on in part 1 of this list, but once again we did not have enough time to really expand on, was the mention that Reed Richards, who is one of the members of the Illuminati, also known by the heroic name of Mr. Fantastic in the comics, has a family. Reed brings up the fact that he too has children, attempting to kind of like empathize with Wanda, like get on her level, talk her down. The Scarlet Witch's response is to ask Reed if his children have a mother who is still alive. He responds with yes, and Wanda is content to hear this response, remarking that that's good because, you know, someone will be left to care for them after she brutally murders him. Ugh. This is a huge revelation for fans of the Fantastic Four and future Foundation teams. It essentially confirms the existence of Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, Reed's wife, and likely their 2 children, Powerhouse Franklin Richards and Brainstorm Valeria Richards. Valeria is incredibly smart, possibly even smarter than her mother and her father, who's mega genius Reed Richards in the comics. Franklin, up until recently, was insanely powerful, also possessing reality warping powers that were on the level of, if not possibly more powerful than Wanda's. Franklin was also considered to be a mutant, but lately his powers have been on the fritz, then they kind of petered out, and with his loss of powers he also lost his mutant status, which was revealed to be potentially untrue. That's what we're led to believe right now. The result of Franklin subconsciously reality warping his own DNA to make himself appear as a mutant. We do not know if Human Torch and the ever-loving blue-eyed thing are around, but we can assume from the 4 on Reed's costume that they most likely are also alive and well in this universe. Because, you know, the Fantastic Four is the 4 of them, so they gotta be around somewhere, right? Or there's other Fantastic Four members that aren't, you know, the main ones. During the epic fight between the Illuminati and Scarlet Witch, Wanda is facing off specifically against Captain Carter. Captain Carter herself is a character from the animated Disney Plus series What If, from episode number 1. She appeared in that episode where we saw the answer to the question, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? During the fight, Scarlet Witch seems to be a bit winded and kind of like asks Captain Carter if she herself wasn't getting tired and would just, you know, rather give up. Captain Carter's response is to say, oh, I could do this all day. This is a specific reference to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Steve Rogers says the same thing during the very first fight we see him in with a man who decides to beat Steve up for asking him to keep quiet in a theater during a wartime reel which was playing prior to a cartoon film. And this is actually even before Steve is Captain America. It's just when he's like scrawny Steve. This saying would become his catchphrase throughout the duration of his time in the MCU. So it's pretty cool to hear Peggy say it too. After defeating the rest of the Illuminati, only a few members remain. The last one to face off with Wanda does so by entering her mind. That's right, we're talking about Professor X. Something you might have noticed is that while in Wanda's mind, Charles can actually walk around. Now, it's established in the comics that in the astral plane or any other mental projection place, including one's own or others' minds, that Charles actually can walk around. This is because of his consciousness being projected, so it's not really his physical body, so he doesn't have the same constraints. Actually, in the comics, Charles was also known for being a gifted fighter before his accident, and is still considered an adept physical combatant within mental planes. Although, maybe not in this case, because he's still super old, so I don't know. We don't really get to see a lot of, you know, Sir Patrick Stewart kicking butt in Wanda's mind or anything like that. Sadly. I would love to see that. At one point, Doctor Strange comes across an alternate version of himself, who we thought might be Sorcerer Supreme based on the previews. Sorcerer Supreme being from the What If episode where, you know, Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands. But this version actually seems to be another alternate version of Strange who destroyed his own universe in attempting to win the heart of Christine. At least that's what I got out of this. This Darkhold possessing Strange is suspicious of main continuity MCU Doctor Strange initially and asks him to share something that only a real Doctor Strange would know. Strange tells him a story about their sister Donna, who died when she was younger, drowning in a frozen lake. Although different from the comics, this is almost one for one what happens to the comic book 616 sister of Doctor Strange, who is, you guessed it, also named Donna. Instead, Donna died when she and Steven went swimming in a lake with some of her friends. Donna gets a cramp and then she drowns. Steven actually tried to save her but ultimately failed to do so, and he still blames himself for her death. In the comics, Steven also has a brother who is named Victor, who becomes a vampire, and Steven also blames himself for Victor's fate too. Steven had it really rough when it came to his family life and his origins. Clea also appears during an end credits scene where it's revealed that the danger to the main continuity is not yet over. She asks Steven to come with her, and it seems based on what we see through her portal that they are on their way to the Dark Dimension, the home of Dormammu. Clea is played by Charlize Theron in the film, and for those who don't know, is actually the current Sorcerer Supreme in the comics right now, following Steven's death. She is also the niece of Dormammu and later becomes the wife of Stephen Strange in the comics as well. I don't mean later as in after he dies, but just later in terms of her own personal history. I think it was like the 80s when they got married in the comics. The 80s for us, I mean, who knows what year it was in the comics. I mean, technically I think Doctor Strange was born in like the 30s or something. Crazy. If there are any Easter eggs you noticed that weren't mentioned here in part 1 or 2, feel free to share them below. As I said, there are lots. Lots and lots and lots. And there are still many that I personally noticed that I haven't really gotten time to mention yet. So if you want more, I got them for you. Thank you as always for watching. This is Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. You can find me on Twitter at VampX13 if you feel so inclined. But until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.